one who just takes a contrarian view. Come on. At least I warned you when I was playing devil's advocate. But it's a bit hubris. However, it's also true. Just because it's hubris doesn't mean we couldn't fix the problem. And if we can fix the problem and we're going to hold ourselves to a higher moral standard, how can we sit on our moral high ground and watch a planet destroy itself?
I agree. I agree with you.
Yes. So I don't like the Prime Directive. I don't. Or General Order 1, as it was called in Enterprise. Again, we don't have either of those in Dear Doctor.
Right.
They literally have nothing at that point. They have the Vulcans don't interfere because they don't care about people. Like, it's not that they don't care. I just annoyed somebody. But there's no name for this order at this point because the whole point of season 1 and 2 of Enterprise was doing the things that led to all these orders.
Right.
So, but again, we're getting to the Prime Directive. That's the whole point of this. So, and I just don't ever agree with it. And the show doesn't either because it breaks it every single time. So as much as people want to argue with me, because I've had a lot of people argue me that the Prime Directive is absolutely necessary and important. Well, if that was true, how come only once in the first episode it chronologically airs in, do they even bother paying attention to it?
Yeah.
It's absurd. Do they talk about the Prime Directive before this in TNG?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, it's...
I don't remember what episodes are in what seasons.
I'm sure there's a season 1. It's just not coming to me.
Because this is episode...
15 is Pen Pals.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. And by the way, just to show that they get punished for even thinking about not helping, Q shows up in the next episode to smack him to the Borg. Just putting it out there.
Nice.
So...
Putting it into context, yes.
I mean, so again, you have one being flying around, just slapping you around, doing whatever he wants, which is the problem, which is why you have a Prime Directive. However, we don't even save populations now. I mean, they did, so great. But like even to debate that is absurd. And again, that living or destruction does not immediately affect any other society. That's the other thing that drives me crazy. If it doesn't immediately affect any other society, it's insane. And they could have done it without anyone ever knowing they had anything to do with it. They could have shot the torpedoes and flown away and nobody would know why it stopped.
Yeah.
They made it more complicated by adding, Data could have said, everything will be fine in 10 minutes. I'll see you later. And shoot the things and then just leave. That was it. But instead, he couldn't get a message to them because it was getting worse. And so he had to go down there and somehow they thought, and again, I agree that going down there is worse than just sending a message. Like, I think number one, I don't remember who. Because Data says it to Picard, I can't make it a message there. What's the difference between me going down to the planet and delivering it myself or just sending it?
Oh, I know.
And Riker's like, a whole heck of a lot of difference. And they just blew him off like, yeah, whatever, dude. We're not listening to you. Of course it's a whole... She just went from talking to a being that's on a ship somewhere. She didn't know the ship existed, by the way. Oh, yeah. Even to that point, she doesn't actually know where he is.
Right.
She just knows he's out there somewhere.
Exactly.
To finding out that androids walk around and ending up on the ship with him.
Yeah.
Massively different.
Yes. I totally love Riker and Picard, where it's like, Riker's like, well, where are we now? And he puts his hand up above his eyes,
Yeah.
We're up to here. Now we're up to here,
Yes. Yeah, that was a good scene. But
so
I don't know.
Going back to your question, which I actually had in my notes, Symbiosis is a season 1 episode that definitely talks about the Prime Directive. Which I actually put in my notes under Dear Doctors, because that's the 2 planets where they're going back and forth, and one thinks that they have a disease and the other planet gives them medicine, but it's the drug going back and forth. Okay. So that one is very similar, and that is a season 1. And then also one is Justice, which is a season 1 where Wesley and they have to deal with the Prime Directive and not interfere with their society's laws. So
is that the one where he's getting arrested?
Yeah, because he walked through the flower bed.
Yeah, he fell actually into the flower bed, didn't
Yes, that's true.
he? Yeah, that's a different twist on the Prime Directive, though.
Yeah, but it still talks about Prime
Yes.
Directive. So yeah, we get that a lot in season 1.
Yeah, they ignored it, by the way. They got Wesley back. Just pointing that out here.
They did. They were trying to
So-
find all those loopholes. And I think
Yeah, he should have been killed.
I think sort of the summary of this is that we have this Prime Directive. It definitely is talked a lot about, but never followed. And I think it's not followed because we have intelligent people who are looking at each situation and, doing what is right for that situation.
Right, which is exactly what Pulaski says to start that conversation. Because Worf jumps in first and says, we can't do anything because the Prime Directive isn't a guideline. It's a rigid set of rules. Or it's an absolute. That's what he says. Pulaski goes, well, I have a problem with that kind of rigidity.
Yes.
Because it's absurd.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
I hate that I agree with her. She should have taken the Worf role, and Worf should have been on the other side. Wouldn't have made sense for his character to be on that side, though.
Yeah, but she's the doctor.
Right, which is why she should have been on the other side. She's following Phlox's footsteps.
Oh, no.
How about I just don't like her? And not because of her either. That's the sad part here. I like Beverly. So I do actually like, hold on, again, I did an honorable mention about something that had nothing to do with the Prime Directive, but I really like that in the scene with Wesley Crusher, where the guy keeps questioning him and he kind of starts to doubt himself. He walks away and talks to Riker. When he goes back and he says, do the scan, I mean, it plays huge into why they find out what's wrong with the planet, because the scan is what gives them the answer.
Right.
But when he walks back in and he just says, I want you to set up the scan, and he was expecting the guy to argue with him again, the guy just says, okay, no problem, and goes and does it. Like, it gave the same kind of feel you have on the bridge. People argue with Picard, but once Picard has decided, it's over. So the reason why he continued to argue with Wesley the first time was simply because Wesley was allowing it to still be up for decision.
Mm-hmm.
Once Wesley decided, he had no problem listening to orders, even if Wesley is younger and less experienced.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah, I just really like the scene, so I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah. Good leadership.
Yeah, exactly. And he's learning from one of the best, so he should have some idea of how it goes. It's also interesting that at the end of that particular scene with the talk with Riker, he walks over and whispers something into some woman's ear and then leaves.
Oh, yeah, because he was interrupted by Wesley.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, babe, I'll be back.
Yeah, it was whatever.
That's
but
Riker, yes.
I know. It's just... it's been so long since I've seen the TNGs that it's just... It doesn't fit the character you remember.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it completely fits his character, but when you've watched like more of the movies and everything else lately, and Picard, he's with your favorite character,
Deanna Troy.
Yeah, and it's been a long time, but so you kind of see him that way now, and then when you see him as like a ladies' man again, you're like, oh right.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yep. Oh, he was a ladies' man the first.
Yeah, I know, but I don't really associate him that way anymore. Even though I did for so long.
Oh, yeah. Angel One, that's another season 1 episode.
Yeah, right. But it's just like seeing Picard now. Like that's one of the hardest things about the new Picard series for people is he's not the Picard you associate him with.
Right, yeah.
He's changed. Now, the change with Riker was more gradual, and we've had years to know that he's with Troy, so it's not that big of a deal. But watching back now is the same as now coming to today and watching Picard and seeing like this shell of a man. Mm-hmm. It's jarring. It's also... this version of Picard is way more jarring than that difference in Riker, but all of it which has nothing to do with the Prime Directive. But
so my final thoughts, I really enjoyed doing the research and sort of, because when I watched the episodes, I was like, well, how are they making this distinction? How are they making and deciding when to interfere? Medical... Do we help in all medical situations? I mean, technology seems to be pretty clear cut. But it was interesting to see, well, this was in Penpals, a geological instability. And then going in and finding that those sub orders that I read to you at the top of the podcast, like that was very, very interesting. And again, as I was reading them, I'm like, well, here's an episode where they broke that. Here's an episode, So I like the idea that we've come to, well, at least in my mind, that, we have this directive and it would be smart to try to follow it, but look at each scenario separately to decide what is best. And I think you're right that captains should have that. We know Starfleet, if Starfleet gives the command, then we're going to follow it. But I think it should go down to captains because that's where they're out in space. They're in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes they can't get word back. Now, if it's something, okay, we can, for instance, this particular scenario in Dear Doctor, they could have contacted Starfleet and talked about it and debated it because they did have some time to come back and fix, right?
Yeah.
But it's just as if they made the decision in the field. Nope, we're not doing it, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, and some things are very time sensitive, like in Pen Pals. Like that planet was going to be destroyed. Yeah,
absolutely.
Dear Doctor, we had some time. Maybe Starfleet, could have
should have gone
out,
back.
But...
Yes. Well, you're right. And look, so I get it. C-SPAN on Star Trek would be boring. I don't want to see them debating this on the Starfleet floor, but there should have been some kind of mention of it later on or something. That something had been talked about, but whatever. But yes, and Pen Pals is the exact opposite. The captain has to make a decision.
Right.
Now, technically, he was dead wrong because he interfered.
Yeah. Yeah, I like in the line in Pen Pals, live fast and die hard, when they were talking about the star system.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, I really don't have any other final thoughts. I don't like this Prime Directive, period. I don't think it should be a directive. It should be a guideline, and it should be you should be training your officers to feel the way Starfleet feels and then trust them in the field.
Okay. So I want to, how can I preface this? I think it needs to be taught as a directive. But I think with your captain logs and your reporting too, that the consequences shouldn't be as severe as what people believe or think that if you break General Order number 1. Case in point. Listeners, just bear with me. My heart is in the right spot. There are a lot of kids who do not have stable, healthy homes. And when they come to my door at times, there's a natural connection there. So it is stated over and over, especially now, not so much at the beginning of my teaching career, but now there are no hugging students, no touching, no nothing. I understand why it has been taken advantage of. There have been very many bad teachers, coaches, administrators, whatever. I get that. But when I have a kid crying to me, I'm giving that kid a hug in part because I know my boundaries and I know what they need. This is a case by case scenario. And so if that, so I go tell my principal, yes, I gave this kid a hug. This kid's having a hard time. This is the situation. So I'm giving my report back, right? I shouldn't be losing my job. That is a huge, big no-no in the industry. You don't. But when I make that report, you have to take into account these children. Do you know what I mean? I think it needs to be stated very firmly, but then have the trust of the captains, of the teachers, the professionals. I'm treated as a professional that I know the difference and when a kid needs a hug and,
Yes, I do know what you mean. I think that works fine when you're training someone as a non-officer. I think by the time you become an officer in Starfleet, though, you should be taught it has leeway. Whereas the hugging thing, you're not taught it has leeway. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a big no-no, period, end of story.
Yep.
But by the time you're in the command track to become a captain or something along those lines, they should be easing off of it being a hard, fast directive at that point. because you should be doing a little bit more analytical thinking about something like that.
Right.
And we don't know that